Hey Andrea, welcome to Smash Your Own Ceiling podcast. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Now, we've been talking about this for a while. We haven't actually known each other for very long, um, but it seems like I've known you forever. You're one of those people.
I'm one of those people that's either common as muck or completely transparent, sharing everything with strangers.
Or just downright lovely, and it feels like you've always been in my life. I'm going to go for option three.
Nice,
But
nice.
I'm so pleased that you're here because this is a topic that so many people struggle with. But before we get to that, before we get to all the juice, let's learn a little bit more about you. So tell us your story, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll dive into the real topic of confident conversations today.
Okay, so I've been in business for 24 years now, which is incredible, Barbara, because I am only 27 years old.
I knew that about you. Yeah.
Or at least that's what my menopausal brain keeps telling me. And over that time, I've worked with lots of different organisations, from television to the NHS, from brewing to construction. And my signature dish, if you like, is helping people to have difficult conversations about sensitive subjects. I believe that conversations can not only change, but also save lives. And I sometimes come across people, often in newly promoted, maybe within businesses, who are really uncomfortable to perhaps talk about some of the stuff that needs to be talked about. And, that could be anything from attendance, performance, all the way through to genuine concern for somebody's health and well-being.
Mm, yeah. And it is a topic that so many people struggle with. So how did you get into this? What's your background? How did you why this?
Why this? My background, if I go all the way back to when I used to have a proper job, as my mother says,
Mhm.
my role was in HR. And I would get rolled out whenever a line manager needed to have a difficult conversation with a member of his team. And it really just went from there. So when I left the corporate world, that was the, if you like, that was the big thing that I went forward with. And that's what I guess over the years I've become known for. So its first iteration was Tough Talk, the challenge of workplace conversations. And today's version, I actually run a variety of leadership masterclasses around the subject. So, whether it's a specific sensitive subject, such as menopause, mental health, suicide risk, or whether it's general, the ability to talk about the more challenging stuff, that's what I do. And that's how I ended up here. It
Mm.
just happened. It certainly wasn't on my to do list when I left school.
Nothing ever is. Yeah. None of
Mm.
the good stuff is. It's always a lovely journey of self-discovery that gets us to where we are, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think when I left school, I wanted to be a vet.
Oh, did you really?
Yes, but then I worked out that you can't save them all. So I thought,
Mm,
no, that'll be a pretty
that
sad
would be
job.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you have got a love of dogs.
I have. I've actually been involved in dog rescue for getting on for 20 years now.
Mhm.
I set up my own charity about 15 years ago because I'm one of those people that go, well, I don't like it like that, so I'm going to make my own.
Yes.
So Finding Forever Homes was set up, and we've been fortunate enough to help lots of dogs into new homes. So yeah, that's my behind the scenes stuff.
I love that about you. I am such a dog person. I've had dogs my entire life. I now have Nellie, who's by far my most bonkers pup that I've ever had. Um, yeah, she's wiser than all of us, which makes it even more fun.
Mm.
But yeah, I really love that about you.
We like a
And
dog with character.
we
That's
do,
what we
we
say.
do.
A
We
dog with
do.
character. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I love your business name, which is Confident Conversations. And I
Mm.
like that because so often we talk about difficult conversations or courageous
Mm.
conversations, but even those two sentences, difficult conversation, they're kind of like tainted with fear, I
Yeah.
think, aren't they? So, oh, this conversation's going to be difficult, so
Mm.
I'm going to be afraid of doing it, or I'm going
Yeah.
to try not to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas the
Yeah.
way your slant, which I love, which is confident conversations, it's
Mm.
we're just having a conversation, and we've
Absolutely. It's about saying what needs to be said, but in a way that doesn't damage the relationship.
yeah,
And it doesn't have to be difficult.
it's just a conversation, right?
Yeah, I've got some stuff that's on my mind. I'd like to share it with you and see if together we can find a way forward.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to take for today at least, however, whatever you decide to call it in your work. But for today, I really like the confident conversations. I think that works so much nicer and it takes away all the pressure. So which are there, when we're talking about conversations then at work or a difficult conversation, a
Mm,
confident conversation,
mm.
what what falls under that banner in your mind?
Do you know, it can be all sorts of stuff. It may be one of those conversations that you're worried about the reaction. So it might be that you need to share some news that perhaps people won't like. Over the years, I've worked in organizations going through restructures where they've had management buyouts, where they've had to have some pretty confident conversations about what the future might look like. So it might be something like that. And at the other end of the spectrum, obviously, we're recording this podcast in Mental Health Awareness Week. And you are probably very well aware that currently organisations are dealing with sickness absence at a 10-year high. And the second biggest cause of absence at the moment is indeed poor mental health. And sometimes people feel that they don't have the skill, the knowledge, and that then impacts on their confidence. And actually, do you know what? Sometimes it's just about saying to somebody, "Are you all right, mate?"
Mm,
So, confident conversations can be a whole plethora
mm,
of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And you're right, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be anything special. It can be, are you all right, mate? How are
Mm,
things? Yeah,
mm,
let's have a chat, let's have a coffee
mm.
and just see where things go.
Yeah.
Because so often what I see is when something's under the banner of confident conversation, there's this fear of if I'm afraid frightened of saying the wrong thing,
Yeah.
or I'm scared that I'm not going to get it right,
Yeah.
or I'm scared that there's going to be repercussions, are
Mm,
they going to take what I'm saying in a
mm,
negative way, or it's gonna escalate to something else. And
mm.
so instead of doing that, I don't do anything. There's
Yes.
and there's the hope, oh, it'll be fine. It'll all pass by, and we try and sweep it under the carpet. But all that's left is a really, lumpy carpet, isn't it? It just comes
Absolutely.
back.
Yeah. And I've gone into work in organizations where they've said to me, oh, we need to do some work in this area with this team. And I get there, and the crux of the issue is actually a conversation that wasn't had 5 years ago. And since then, people have been tiptoeing around it. It's sitting there like the elephant in the room. Or because it hasn't been tackled, it's run riot.
Hmm.
And it's got bigger and it's got more complicated and it's involved more people. And now it's an issue where back then it was a 5-minute conversation that said, look, we need to talk about this. We need to find a different way of doing it, or something really simple.
And exactly that. It can just grow arms and legs, can't it?
Mm,
And it turn into something bigger as a result of not doing anything
yeah.
about it.
For sure. And
But
I think sometimes because we don't approach it, we actually blow it out of proportion in our own minds. And that's not just in the workplace, that's every facet of human life. If in my head I'm turning it into a really big deal, the story I'm telling myself.
mhm.
Let's throw in a bit of Brené nice and early. And we create our own barriers, our own hurdles, and when we stop and challenge it, it's like, well, actually, it's not that big a deal. But I've turned it into something that is just not necessary.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I can give you a million examples of where, and I bet you've had this experience as well, where you've had this fear of having this conversation. You've had the conversation and it really was a 2-minute job and it really was okay. And you've come home and gone, yeah, it wasn't as bad as what I thought it was. I wish I'd have done it sooner.
Mm. And it's sometimes it's the time delay that makes it a problem. You
Mm,
know, I always say to people, you know, the timing of that conversation is just as important as what you say and how you say it. Because the longer you leave it, not only is there less chance that that person will, you know, sort of remember exactly what the issue was. I mean, you know, as I mentioned to you before, with my menopausal brain, sometimes I don't know what my name is, let alone what I've done this morning. So not leaving it so that people don't remember it clearly. But also, sometimes I think people would then think, well, why didn't you tell me then? Why have you left it until now?
yeah.
You know, you've left me and I've been doing the same thing, you know, for the last 3 weeks. You've not said anything. I now feel a bit foolish. And certainly in the workplace, I believe that people fundamentally go to work with the intention of doing a good job. And if they're not doing a good job, most people want to know, and as soon as possible, so that they can do something about it. So we don't do anybody any favors by delaying it.
No, I completely agree. And the thought that popped into my head as you were saying this, Andrea, is appraisal time is actually a big trap for this, you know. And so often I've seen this happen so often where people have been doing the same thing, you know, happily going about their life thinking that they're doing okay. And then
Mm,
it comes to appraisal time, which could be months after,
yeah.
and then they're being given the feedback and they think, hang on a minute, that's been months. I could have
Mm,
done this. I could have
mm,
done something about it because,
yeah.
as you quite rightly said, I people don't come to work to do a bad job. We all want to
Mm,
do a great job. We all want to know that we're doing a great job. And the
mm,
reverse is true. We do want to know if we're not, so we can do something about it.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where sometimes the emotion gets the better of the
Mm.
conversation, because if I'm feeling badly done to because you've not mentioned it and you've let me carry on doing it wrong or looking stupid or whatever, you know, it's like, imagine if your mate didn't tell you that your dress was tucked in the back of your knickers
Yes.
and allowed you to
Yeah.
keep walking across the, you know, the main floor. You'd be a bit peeved and think, well, you know, you could have said something. I've been making a fool of myself. So, you know, the timing of it, although it's important that we do it in a timely fashion, I would say also with regards to timing, give yourself enough time that you can come to terms with the emotion that you've got about it as well.
Mm. Yeah, so two really good pieces of advice there.
Mm.
So timely fashion is so
Yeah.
important. So if we were to kind of put a number on it, and I know it depends on the situation, it depends on what's going on. There could be all sorts like holidays and all sorts of things in between. But roughly, what do you reckon? What would be a good starter for 10 in terms of how quickly?
I would always say to people, as soon as possible after the event,
Mm,
you know, taking into account obviously the depth of emotion. If you're absolutely fuming and raging because what they've done is, you know, whatever, then you need to get a grip of that first. And that's where that whole self-awareness and emotional intelligence piece comes in, managing your own state.
yes.
But once you're feeling calm, we then need to think about timing from the other person's perspective, because I've seen some horrific examples. You know, I had a guy once who wanted to leave a workshop early because he said, he said, I need to get off. He said, there's a bloke and his performance hasn't been right for a few months. He said, but if I don't catch him today before 3 o'clock, he said, he's about to go off on his honeymoon. So I want to have that conversation with him today. And I was like, really?
Stop.
Really? So I think there's also that element of respect for the other
Yeah.
person's circumstance. And, you know, think about, is it fair for me to do it in this way at this time? If you know that that person's got so much going on that they're just literally up to their eyes and stressed out completely, now isn't the time to casually mention something that's about a month old.
Mm,
So it's kind of, unfortunately, there isn't a hard, fast answer. My advice is always, as soon as possible after the event,
Mm.
once you've got your emotions under control.
Yes, I love that you've said that about getting your own emotions, not to shoot from the hip or get to be overreacting. It's stop, be discerning, pause for a minute, go and
Mm.
sort yourself out, and then that's
Yeah.
when you tackle it.
Yeah. And I always say to managers, that might only be 5 minutes. It might
Mm.
just be that you take yourself off to the kitchen, you boil the kettle, whatever, but you just need to get comfortable in your own mind with what you're going to say and also how you're going to say it.
Yeah.
Because if it is too close to the event and the emotion is still there, then what you say won't sound the way that you want it to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. Um, I also just want to mention in terms of being the timing, when you're talking about something where you're potentially worried about somebody, maybe it's their
Mm,
mental health, then that was slightly different. I think
yeah,
it's yeah. So
yeah.
what would you think about that?
With that, I would say that isn't a conversation that you're going to delay.
Mhm.
That to me would be a conversation that I'd want to have at the earliest possible opportunity. And again, choosing the right moment is important, but there will never be a perfect moment.
Mm. It's always
And
sorry. Go on, Andrea.
no, I was just going to say, and when I say choosing the right moment, what I'm saying is the difference between in a busy, crowded office or 10 minutes later in the kitchen when there's just the two of you. Yeah, I'm not talking about leave it for a couple of days until the perfect moment presents itself because it never will. And actually, with some of the stuff that I deal with, a couple of days might be too late.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And also just add on that, trust your gut. If you
Mm,
feel like you need to just, touch base with somebody,
yeah,
then always just trust your gut with that.
yeah. And even say that to them, there is absolutely nothing wrong in saying to somebody, look, can I just have a quick word? It might just be me, but it just feels as though something's a bit off today. And when I started to think about it, I noticed in the meeting this morning, you didn't speak up in the way that you normally do. And I'm just asking from a place of concern. Is everything
Mm,
all right, mate?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it can be as simple as that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And the simpler, the better. Every single one of us has the capacity to make a positive difference. We don't need to be mental health experts. We don't need to have a script. We don't need to have a diagnosis to whip out of our back pocket. In fact, all of that stuff is the wrong stuff. It's just about creating an opportunity to have a conversation of concern. And as long as you're bringing that combination of compassion and curiosity, you'll not go far wrong.
Mm. You said something that I think it's worth kind of just highlighting that you don't need to be qualified. You don't need to be a qualified mental health first
No.
aider, or if you're feeling worried about somebody,
Mm.
then a 2-minute chat of how are things going? Is everything all right?
Yeah.
Do you need to talk? I'm here.
Yeah.
It might make all the difference.
Yeah. I mean, at the extreme end of the work I do, I work in suicide prevention. And I've trained people from food bank volunteers through to Samaritans, people at the Ministry of Justice. And the thing that I say to all of them is it doesn't matter who you are or what your background is. All we're talking about here is being a decent human being.
Mm,
Every single one of us has the ability to change and save a life.
mm,
And as little as a 20-minute conversation can do that.
yeah. What
So,
what do you do? I think one of the worries is I have the conversation, I come up
mhm,
to you, I ask you, and then you say something like, I'm in a bad place right now, or
okay.
I'm not doing too well, or whatever it might be,
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
their phrase is. What Because that's probably the biggest fear that most people have. What do I do then?
Okay, nice and easy. What you do then is you say, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you want to go and grab a coffee? Do you want to go and find somewhere a bit quieter? Should we go out for a little walk? And basically, you create an opportunity for that person, if they want to talk to you about whatever it is that's going on for them.
Mhm.
And in the majority of cases, people don't need you to give them a good talking to. What people need is a bloody good listening to.
Yes.
And so just by you saying, I am offering you the time, the space, the opportunity without judgment to talk to me about what it is, and just gentle questions that you would ask if I said to you, oh, do you know what, Barbara, I've got a bit of a sore head. You might say to me, oh, what's been going on? What do you think might have caused it? Have you spoken to anybody? Have you tried anything to help with that? And you're literally talking along those same lines. Talk to me about what's been happening. What's underneath all of this? Have you spoken to anybody else about how you're feeling? What sort of things do you think might be useful? Who might it be a good idea to connect with? Because these conversations are not about you becoming the help. These conversations are about you helping people get the help they need.
Right, let's just highlight that. That's so important because I think that's a common fear that all of a sudden I'm going to be the help and I don't know what to do. And
No,
excuse me, and I'm putting myself in uncharted territory. And
right.
what happens then? But
Yeah,
it's not about that. It's not, you're not suddenly becoming the help. You're
no,
helping the person find the help that they need.
yeah. And you can't help them get the right help if you don't take time to understand what the issue is in the first place. Everybody assumes that if it is, we've kind of got into the mental health conversations. Everybody assumes that if somebody is a little bit out of sorts, perhaps their mood isn't great, perhaps feeling a bit overwhelmed, everyone assumes, oh, there's a mental health problem. They need to go to the GP, they need to get prescription, they need to have some medication. And actually, sometimes people are just overwhelmed by life. And therefore, they might be better off going to the Citizens Advice Bureau and getting some, debt management support. You just don't know until you engage in a confident conversation whereby you just ask simple questions as any decent human being.
Yes, that's it. It's being just a decent person, a decent human being, asking some questions, being there. And sometimes it's just about being there when they're looking for that support. So if they
Yeah,
do need to go to Citizens Advice, you might want to check in after them
yeah,
afterwards and say, how did you get on? Is
yeah,
everything all right? Do you want me to sit here while you phone them?
absolutely.
And sometimes even just picking up that phone and talking to somebody else is challenging. So it's just, I'll sit here for a minute if you want me to, while you pick up the phone. And I'm right here if you want, if you need
Yeah,
anything.
for sure. For sure. And, with no disrespect, I don't want your advice.
Mhm.
A, you're not qualified. B, you're not me.
Yes.
So whatever might have worked for you or somebody else that you might know won't necessarily work for me. So actually the biggest benefit you can give me is to ask me those questions in a compassionate and caring way. And actually sometimes I can work it out for myself
Yes.
just by having the opportunity to say it out loud.
Yes. Because when you're in that situation, you can feel a bit tangled up, it's all overwhelming. Just having the opportunity to talk it through, you have those light bulb moments of,
Mm.
I could do this. And, oh, okay, this is my first step.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a really good question. Geez, yeah. All I need to do actually is give this person a ring and blah, blah, blah. There is so much more power in me feeling capable of finding solutions
Mm,
than there is you sitting opposite me and saying, right, well, what I think you need to do
yeah,
is this, and this.
yeah. Definitely. So it takes the pressure off you as the leader, right? It takes pressure off you.
Absolutely.
You don't have to give the solutions. You don't have to fix
Yeah,
things. And
yeah.
again, as leaders, and I think people in general, we like to fix, don't we? We
Mm,
like to help. We're
yeah, yeah.
all, so many of us were brought up with the under the umbrella of you've got to help people, you've got to be helpful.
Mm,
And this isn't the case. This is just about take the pressure off yourself. You don't have to be that person. It's just
mm.
about listening and just
You
asking
know,
some really good questions.
and whether it is a conversation about something like mental health or whether it is simply a conversation about poor performance,
Yeah.
that same approach works.
Mm.
Because to say to somebody, I've noticed that you're not delivering the results in the way that you normally do, talk to me, what's going on? that's a much more productive conversation to have than, so I've noticed you're not doing it. So what I think you need to do is X, Y, Z and ABC. Again, you're not me. You don't know what's going on for me. You don't know what's getting in the way. And you know what? If you ask me what I think I need to do differently, I'm probably going to be more accountable, take more ownership. And therefore the whole conversation is far more productive. So that coaching approach, if you like, that works right across the board, from managing performance to offering support for poor
Mm.
mental health. What do
Yeah.
you think you need to do? What do you think would be helpful? What do you feel the first step would be? How can I support you with that?
Yes.
That's the approach.
Yes. So good. So much gold already, Andrew, which is really, really good. So as something that popped into my head is, and we've kind of alluded to it a little bit, is giving feedback, right? Because this is something that, again, so many people struggle with, and then they fall back on the old model of just a shit sandwich, right? So you're positive, negative, and positive. But when right, okay, so over to you then. Go for it. You've just literally just shook your head at me and said, "Yeah, I hate that." Let's talk about
Yeah,
that, because this is something people I hear people say all the time. Just do that. Positive,
yeah,
negative, and
yeah.
positive. Right.
No. Well, my experience tells me, and I'm not really only 27. I've actually been around the block
Yeah,
quite a
you've
few
done a few
years.
things.
Yeah,
Not your first day, right?
yeah. Not my first rodeo. And actually, what I find is that if you do use that model, dependent on the person, most of us only hear the meat in the middle, the negative.
Yes.
And we're waiting for that. So stop the flannel of saying something positive, get to the point, and let's both get, out of this conversation. But equally, if you've got somebody who's perhaps a little bit arrogant, or somebody who is lacking in self-awareness, they might not hear the bit in the middle.
Mm.
They hear oh, this is great, and that's marvelous, and shall we crack on? So my belief is that we need to keep it clean, clear, uncluttered. Say what you mean what you say, just don't be mean when you say it.
Mm.
I have a concern and it looks like this. And I wondered if we could take a look at it together and understand what it is that's going on that's either preventing or causing this. Have you got a couple of minutes for us to do that now? Ta-da!
Ta-da, done. Right, let's go through that again. So because that again, if somebody's listening with a paper and pen, right, so it stops them from having to rewind it. Rewind. I'm back in the 80s.
Oh, listen to you. You'll be getting your pencil out for your cassette tape.
Maybe cassette tape. Oh, bless. So I've forgotten now what you said. I'm going to have to rewind it. You've had me yattering too long. I know. I don't know what we're talking
Okay.
about.
So instead of the praise
Yeah.
sandwich, what I'm advocating is I have a bit of a concern,
Mm-hmm.
and I wondered if you and I could have a
Talk
look at
about
this
it.
together. And
Yes.
notice it's a together, it's a we thing. It's not I'm fabulous, you're rubbish, let me point this out. It's I have a concern and I wondered if we could sit down and have a little chat about
Mm.
it. Because what I've noticed is, so if you can always give somebody a specific behavioral example so that they anchor it. And again, that's the other thing I hate. I call it a fishing trip. That where we go, so how do you think you're doing?
Yes.
And in the back of my head, I'm going, well, there must be something not right, or
Something.
else we
Yeah.
wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
So hang
What
on,
have I done wrong?
let me think what it is that you want me to come up with. I mean,
Mm.
nobody in that situation is going to sit opposite you and go, oh, do you know what? I'm glad you brought this up. I've been waiting to tell you that I think I'm rubbish. It's just not going to happen. So forget the fishing trip. I have a concern. I'd like to discuss it with you so that together we can find a way to move forward. Is now a good time for you?
It's
Or
so much.
words to that
Yeah, a word
effect.
to that. Yeah, find your own words around
Yeah.
that so it feels natural. But it's so much cleaner, isn't it? There's a lot more collaboration there. It's not a you and against me, it's not a win-lose kind of situation. It's we're gonna sort this out together because I
Yeah.
want you to succeed. I want you to improve.
And given that most people will want to do the very best they can, You know, most people will be receptive to that approach. I think where it gets sticky is when we offer an opinion rather than feedback.
Yes.
You know, I remember once somebody sitting in on one of the sessions that I ran, and they sat at the back of the room all day making notes. And at the end of the day, they came to me and they said, "Can I give you some feedback?" And I said, "Well, yeah," thinking, "That's why you've been here all day, mate." And he started off with, "You're not very tall, are you?" And I was like, "What? Where's this going? I'm not very tall." And it transpired what he was trying to say was whenever I'd used the flip chart, I'd seemed a little bit awkward and clumsy because of the position of the flip chart, given the fact that I'm only 5'1". And so I was like, "Ugh, I'm not very tall. There's not a lot I can do about that. You know, big shoes hang from the door frame. Not quite sure." So the difference between opinion and feedback, I can do something with it. It's useful, it's helpful. I can change a behavior. And often feedback doesn't contain the emotion that your
Mm,
opinion might.
yes.
Because I
Yeah.
don't care whether you like me. What I care is, have I done the right job? Has it been effective? Have I achieved the outcome that you want? So whether you like me or not really shouldn't come into this.
No. No. And as soon as you start these conversations, and you're absolutely right, there's nothing you could do with that feedback. You're not very tall, are you? That's it. Doesn't help me at all, apart from some platforms, maybe
I know.
potentially.
And I was desperately trying to guess what he was getting
Yeah,
at.
exactly. Exactly. Really, it's really not helpful. But if you once you start having the right conversations, the way that you've described earlier, you're opening the doors for additional conversations. It
Yeah,
builds trust, it builds relationships, doesn't
yeah,
it? And so you're not always having to be the one to go to that person when it's a a conversation full of mutual respect and collaboration, and it's more likely that they're going to be open to coming to you in future.
yeah. And that's where the whole thing boils down to, certainly within organizations. Are you fostering a climate where open, honest, frank dialogue is
Yes.
part of the way we do things around here?
Yeah. And people are feeling safe to do that.
Yeah, that whole psychological safety piece, it's got to
Absolutely.
be okay. And the more as a leader or manager you can work on creating that, the better the conversations
Mm.
are. You know, the quality of the relationship definitely impacts the quality of the conversation.
Completely agree. And this also, it's not just a one-on-one
Mm.
situation. It can be in meetings.
Mm.
It's fostering exactly the same approach in meetings
Yeah.
and in just around the office.
Mm.
It's just creating that really safe environment for people to have
Yeah.
good, honest conversations.
Yeah. Is it okay to say what needs to be said? And if the answer is no, you really need to be doing some work around
Yeah.
that culture first.
Mm. So that brings up my next question actually, which is how do you find out if the answer is no?
How do you find out if the answer is no? What do you mean? Now isn't the time for the
No,
conversation.
no, I mean that you haven't got a safe environment, that you've
Okay.
not got that, you've not got that, so you need to do some work about it. Because so often, again, people won't tell you. You'd be the last to know.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure. And, you know, I think there's lots of clues that tell you that it's not safe. And that's typically, have you ever seen that artificial harmony where we all nod and smile in all the right places?
Mhm.
Nobody ever challenges, nobody ever says, "Oh, there might be a better way."
Mhm.
That is a sure sign that there isn't safety in
Uh,
conversations. So if you're surrounded by yes men or people who are simply nodding and smiling, and every decision, you know, is kind of is met with no resistance whatsoever, that is absolutely an indicator. And one of the questions that I always ask on the programs that I deliver is, does the room light up when you enter or when you leave?
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
So just the whole general vibe that people have, the, you know, the shadow that leaders cast goes far and wide. And it's that sense of, are people coming up with ideas? Are people challenging? Are people being innovative? Are people giving feedback? Are people asking for feedback? As opposed to people whispering behind closed doors or
Yeah.
behind their hand or nodding and smiling in a meeting. And as soon as they walk out of the room, you know, muttering to their mate, and they can get stuffed if they think, "I'm going to do that."
Mm.
all of that stuff is a clear indicator. And there's it really does rely on people to just open their eyes, open their ears, and notice what's going
Yeah.
on around them.
Yes. Yeah. Just dial up that self-awareness a little bit and go, okay, I'm not going to judge myself. This is something that I really want to improve. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's see
Mm.
what happens. Let's just start to be a bit more observant about what's going on.
Yeah. And, if you sit there with your team and say, guys, I'd really appreciate some feedback, and what you get is lots of kind of rabbit in the
Oh, you're
headlights,
fine.
complete
Everything's great. You're doing
silence.
a great job.
Yeah, there is a good sign that actually you need to take a mirror moment, because that isn't really an indication of psychological safety being present.
Yeah. It's time for some work then. Andrea, I'd love for people to be able to find you. Where can they find you? Because this is such an important topic. And it's one that people wouldn't they take for granted, or they think, oh, it's fine, it's happening in my organization, or I'm okay with it, or but something has to be done about it. So where can people find you?
I tend to hang out quite a lot on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
I am the woman with the fabulous shoes. No, if you look for me, Andrea Newton on LinkedIn, you'll find the right one, because I've got 2 little red shoes at the end of my
Oh, no.
name,
Oh,
because that is another little passion of mine that we'll perhaps talk about another day. So LinkedIn, or my website, confidentconversations.co.uk, or my podcast, where indeed your good self, you are appearing on my podcast, which
mhm.
is Really Useful Conversations.
Amazing. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. It's just been value packed. There's loads of good stuff there. So it might be that you're listening while you're walking the dog or you're driving the car. Go home, grab a notebook and pen, and write some notes down, because it's that kind of podcast. But thank you so much, Andrea. It's always a pleasure, and I'll see you soon.
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you.